Hi, and welcome back to my channel. I am the Art Whisperer, and on this channel, I like to talk about art interpretation and its connection to current day life. I do hold a BA in art history, which would mean I know how to make a really good cup of coffee, but totally the opposite. I can't make coffee to save my life, but I could totally drink coffee like for the rest of my life. But remember, this is for entertainment purposes only, so let's dive into this. This week is going to be a continuation from last week. We're going to talk about Quentin Matsys. Last week we talked about the Ugly Duchess, and this week we're going to talk about his 1520 painting on wood panel called A Portrait of a Woman. Because I talked about it last week, I'm not going to go over his boring bio this week, and it is quite boring. This week's art piece, take a really good look at it. It's in complete contrast to The Ugly Duchess. First thing you might notice is that this week's piece lacks vibrant color. Last week's piece, you had this beautiful blue hue throughout, especially in the brassiere headdress looking cone head thing that she had happening. This week, they're more subtle. The hues are a lot more boring. It is a portrait of a middle-aged woman. Now, how can we tell that? Well, first of all, she looks middle-aged. Her headdress is simple. It's white. It still has a point because for some reason fashion back then meant you need to have like hair height. I don't understand that. So she's got this headdress thing that kind of comes up a little bit in the back. It's very simple, very white, covers her hair completely, which it was common that women did expose some of their hair on top, with some of the headpieces that they had. But not this woman. This woman's a little more reserved. She's a little more modest. And maybe it's her age. I'm not too sure. And why do I think she's middle-aged? Well, yes, she looks middle-aged, unless she's really young. And unfortunately, she just looks really haggard for her age. Because then in that case, I'd feel really bad for her. Her headdress is basic white. It was common to have white linen, embellished ones, lacy black cloth ones, on and on and on. This is kind of boring, kind of like the way the colors are in this painting. Now, as you could tell by her beautifully middle-aged, mature woman's face, it's very clean. It's there aren't many wrinkles. She looks like she takes care of herself, and you can see in her hands, at least her hand, the delicate nature of her stance. You have the fingers gently caress her book. You can see the feminine rings. There's nothing ostentatious about this woman. No, 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 no. Now, her fingers, you can tell that they are dirty. I mean, not her fingers, more her fingernails. And this reminds me of my first video where I talked about escaping criticism and that boy's funky feet with his dirty nails. I don't know, maybe it was a common thing, but you'd think that someone who has like a clean face obviously takes care of herself because she is lacking the wrinkles, even though you can tell her age. She's got some funky fingers. But let's focus on what she's holding. She's holding a book of prayers. Now, what makes me think that is basically the way she's dressed. You see, very wealthy women, yes, they were taught to read by tutors, and they could have afforded many other books. Middle class women, yes, they were taught to read, but usually by their mothers or their husbands. Very common. They were taught by a clergy member, and usually a big book was a prayer book. I mean, that is exactly what they read a lot. Now, poorer women, some did read, some didn't, but a book was kind of expensive, especially a book with the gold leaf like this, with the ornate illustrations like this. And look at that beautiful clasp, the way it kind of hangs open, but not too loose. So you could tell it's a pretty tight clasp, which probably means that this book is cared for and very gently opened and closed each time. Now, in direct contrast to what she's holding, it's a book of religion, it's a book of prayers, it's a book of morality. So obviously, this woman must be it. The direct symbolism for what's in the picture, like last week, where you could tell the woman was disfigured and kind of ugly, that she had the beautiful rose. This week, it's not so obvious. And you can see that by looking at her eyes and looking deeper into that book. Now, she's holding this book. She obviously was reading it, even though she's kind of glancing away. The book represents the way she's dressed. It's not like she's dressed like, some prostitute or, some criminal and she's reading this book. Her dress, her manner goes with the book. And the book, obviously, being expensive, I think a book back then would be like worth, I don't know, like $120 and, today's money, which I'm sorry, you might own those kind of books, but personally me, I'm not going to buy a book worth $120. No, thank you. I'd rather read it for free online. So she's holding this book, right? But it's not keeping her attention. It's not like some trashy novel with Fabio on the cover, okay? This is a book that she's probably forced to read and might enjoy it once in a while, but obviously the Bible is not too thrilling, or the prayer book is not too thrilling, where she's got something that's drawing her attention away. Her eyes, okay? She's looking at something else. That gaze, like out the frame. Now, if you look at the frame, you would think that Quentin is attempting this Trompe l'oeil style, like in escaping criticism. But if you take a closer look, you can see how the lines are blurred. It's not so crisp. Everything looks as though they're on the same plane. And it's not so ornate of a frame. Background is kind of bare. I mean, again, just like in The Ugly Duchess, and in complete contrast to The Ugly Duchess, this isn't in a caricature style. It's not very in your face. But if you look deep into her face, look at those deep eyes, you'll see something. What I see is someone who is cold and judgmental. In The Ugly Duchess, her eyes looked sad and yet kind, like she could have had a beautiful soul. This woman, not so much. I mean, she might be dressed appropriately. She might be reading something to make her look so devout. But she's got this gaze on her like if she's looking out the window judging somebody walking down the street without even knowing them. And you can so see that. I mean, okay, I judge a lot of things, especially art, on this channel. So I'm going to continue to judge. She does not look like a nice person at all. She does not look like the kind, moral individual that she's trying to portray. But is that what Quentin is trying to portray? I mean, he's known for his symbolism. So something's got to be hidden there. And I think the eyes are telling. I mean, they say that the eyes are the windows to the soul. And her soul is looking kind of cold. But The Ugly Duchess, her soul looked kind of warm. Was Quentin trying to take another dig at another woman? I mean, how many of his paintings, I wonder, have like secret digs at them? Just a little jab at their expense, poking fun. Would that show what's in his eyes? I mean, it was obvious last week, but this week, is it still kind of obvious now that you know what to look for? I mean, Quentin is known for this, and in looking at this, I don't know, he kind of painted her in a very stout, reserved way, but I think he took a dig at mixing the gaze that she's supposed to be eyes deep into, that she's totally not. No. It's as though that gaze is showing that she probably thinks, yeah, I'm better than anybody else. I mean, look at them. And that kind of reminded me of that TikTok challenge that I went off on a tiny little tangent last week. Hashtag new teacher challenge was not a very nice one. And she seems to have that judgmental, I'm better than thou, my poo don't stink kind of gaze in her eyes, the way that I imagined those bullying parents having on their faces if I were to ever really take a good look at them, which I really don't want to because it's very cruel. Those parents that should be ashamed of themselves, judging other people, thinking that they're better when that's not really the case. Now, I always sit back and I wonder, what would my eyes say about my soul? You see, I kind of like to have an air of mystery. So in my eyes, I am drawing a curtain over, so you can't really tell. You might be able to see the shadow of somebody walking back and forth, but you're still not quite sure. But I think with both of these women, you're able to pick up a little more on it. The messages can extend to current day in a multitude of ways. And whether or not you agree with the messages, whether or not you even care, it speaks. And it speaks to everybody. I really hope that you're finding ways to connect to not just these pieces that I talk about, but many other pieces. Now you tell me, what do you think? Do you think Quentin really was taking a dig at these women? What do you think your eyes would say if Quentin painted them? Were you ever able to find out who Lizzie Velasquez was with the hashtag New Teacher Challenge? Put it in the comment section down below. Hit that like button, give a thumbs up, and come back next week to see what piece I choose here on The Art Whisperer.